At this point, I would like to make a motion that prior to voting on second readings, consent agenda, or departmental reports, that we allow any resident of Hickory who would like, subject to our normal rules of decorum, to speak before the council tonight. Second. Motion by Mayor Wright, second by Mr. Meisner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Is there anyone who would like to speak on a specific agenda item before we proceed to conduct our business? Okay, let's go to the second readings. Matters not on the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have something. I'd like to make a motion. I don't know, do I need to get approval to make the motion? I guess I just make the motion. Here, the motion is, it's sort of along the lines of you asking for folks to speak prior to the consent agenda. I see some issues with that, potentially moving forward as a practice. Specifically pulling out specific agenda items for discussion. I'm concerned about, let's say, the case of a public hearing where we have a bona fide advertised public hearing, and then here at the beginning of the meeting we ask folks who wants to speak on a specific agenda item. Well, folks can come up and speak on that agenda item, which would in fact be the public hearing. It would be outside the protocol of a public hearing. Public hearing will be open. It wouldn't be subject to the same time frames. I mean, that's one thing that I think that we need to consider. The second thing we need to consider is, I think, in the conduct of our meetings, we like hearing from citizens. I do. I certainly do, and want to do that. But I mean, I think there's comments that are more along the lines of forum type comments, like, you know, I know Mr. Bollinger, he's not here. He might speak to us about the party of burying an underground line. And then there's comments, of course, about specific items that may or may not be on the agenda. So I'm a little bit unclear as to, and I think the public perhaps might be unclear as perhaps when the appropriate time for them to speak would be. But what I'd like to suggest is we round up 3 council members that would be willing to do it, and meet with our legal folks, because I think there's a lot of legal issues that particularly as it relates to public hearings. Meet with our staff folks who can give us some ideas and best practices, and then move forward so we've got sort of a good understanding of bring forth recommendations. I don't think there's any urgency to this. I don't think the committee would have to convene right away and report within the next month or so. But I do think that I wanted to throw that out for discussion among council, and we move that we move forward towards developing a committee or to explore that particular issue, and others that we may give to other issues. As it relates to the conduct of our meetings.
Input from us?
I guess I'm looking. That's purely a form of a long-winded motion. I was trying to. That's why I was asking about. I didn't want get into explaining all this without. But the motion is that we institute a committee to look about the conduct of the meetings, and particularly citizen comment, the duration of, and the sequence within our agenda.
I think the first thing you would need is to vote on whether to allow him to raise this item on the agenda and then address his motion.
Yeah, I thought the council went to any time to bring something up for motion.
Well, over here it says matters not on agenda requires majority vote of council to consider.
That's why I wasn't sure. I need to.
Well, I make a motion that we discuss this.
Second.
Got a motion by Wright, second by Meisner. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. It's unanimous. Well, go ahead. Well, I'm not at all opposed to that, except that it seems to me like we're making something very complicated that's pretty simple. If you'll notice, my motion was that if anyone wanted to speak on something that was a specific agenda item, that they could do so before we vote and not have to wait until after we vote. During this referendum process, I heard from people that essentially, well, why would that be a big deal to let them speak before you vote rather than after you vote? I don't think people would confuse it. Public hearings, they understand they have a right to speak, and so they would be allowed to speak during the public hearing. If they get off the subject, I think we ought to say, just like we did with the speaker who kept getting off the subject, and we were talking about the date and wording of the referendum. We said, you're off the subject. What does that have to do with the referendum? So I think we should say it's about a specific issue only. This is not a chance to get up here and set a tone for this entire meeting based on some gripe you have about city council. You got to say that for the end, but you'll get your chance. You'll get your chance.
And I think your motion was well put because it's spelled that out. At the end, you have an opportunity by going to speak about due power or some problems we're going to have, or just a forum. Somebody might have a gripe. But if anybody has a specific item that they want to discuss,
That's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. Tonight we agreed right now.
And so my recommendation would be that as long as that's working, tonight it, by chance, it worked in the sense that nobody had anything pressing that they wanted to talk about. But it would be fine if somebody had wanted to talk about a second reading or any of these matters. That would have been fine.
I guess my question is, since we're in the discussion, is are they they're sharing an opinion? It's not we're not entering into a discussion with them, or they're just giving an opinion on that second reading. Say, look, I'm against consent item K, LB calls.
Well, they can't even. Well, the way I interpreted that was they get to express their opinion like they would at the end of this meeting, but it's just they get to do so before we vote. It's not a cross-examination council, and we've not let our meetings deteriorate into that, and I can't imagine that we ever would. But and I think we need to keep them on the subject. But it seems to me like it's fairly simple. As long as it works this way, why not just do it? You know, hey, if you want to speak before we vote, you can speak before we vote. But if somebody abuses it, or if a group of people get together and abuse it, we don't have a process that we've set up. We don't have a resolution. We don't have anything that we've got to undo. We just say, folks, that was a great experiment in democracy. It didn't work. And we just quit doing it.
So I must be missing something here. We talked about how we were going to do this at the planning of the meeting. So what's your problem with what we talked about in the planning of the meeting?
I don't have a problem with it.
I just didn't understand sort of
where I'm going.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that we are statutorily required to receive public comment at our meetings. Okay.
We always have.
We always have. And of course, we want that.
We won't.
And I understand when people say, "Hey, I'd like to be able to address city council," but the problem is, it's at the end of the meeting,
and you've already voted.
But
I
we
get it.
solved that, didn't we?
Well, we solved it. We solved it with a motion that is subject to change. That does not really. It doesn't have a lot of. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty with it. A lot of uncertainty with it, in my opinion. A lot of uncertainty. I'd like to see a study. I'd like to see us.
Public hearing?
No, I'm not saying a public hearing by any means.
I'd like to see a subcommittee of council.
People want to speak. We could make this a lot more complicated, in my opinion, only my opinion. A lot more complicated than it needs to be, unless this proves to be a problem. I don't think this will ever be a problem. We've only in 11 years had one person say they wanted to speak on an agenda item before we voted on it. In 11 years, one person.
And two, they have the ability to call any council member or the mayor and ask that they have the agenda item explained. So we've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
They have 4 days.
We got the time to explain it to the citizen, and if we don't do our jobs well in explaining it, we can ask that they meet with Mr. Berry to explain it, but I think it's incumbent on us to be able to explain any agenda item if we do our work. Sure. To explain it to a citizen that we call, but I have yet in my 7 years, no one has ever called and said, I want you to pull this off. Or I have had people ask me to explain stuff, and I can explain it, but it is also incumbent on these citizens to step up to the plate if they have a problem to contact us. I mean,
I understand. I'm not advocating for one way or the other. This is not something. I just like us to put a process behind it out here that people can participate in, and then we'll know. I don't know. I don't necessarily think what we've got is broken. I do understand the whole, the comments before the thing.
We had one case, and I feel like I feel like it's an easy response.
Yeah.
We're going to give up that amount of time anyway. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say, we're not giving up time. We are doing our job and listening to the citizens, whether it comes first or last.
Right.
This is not changing, not adding anything to our meeting. We are just avoiding this implication that we just pell-mell rush into a vote and don't care what the citizen thinks about it.
But the citizen
And then that's why you end up,
they can contact us.
and that's why you end up with this thing of cross-examination. And if you say yes, it's going to go one way. You say no, it's going to go another. And so we're up here in a catch-22, sometimes looking kind of foolish, because we're not supposed to end up being in a debate with the rest of the very meeting.
No, not at all.
It's not our job.
Right. And I think a public hearing is a very separate and.
Well, if somebody said they wanted to speak about a public hearing item, I would make sure they understood that they have an opportunity during the public hearing, in accordance with the provisions of the public hearing, to speak at that time. Now, I can't do anything if they would say, well, I'm just going to speak now. I don't know what we would do.
We've been always very open about public hearings. We've been over backwards with that. And over the years, council members have removed items from consent agenda. And they may be, in some instances, removed it for their own explanation, but a lot of times it was citizen-driven. Someone saw that, they took it upon themselves to read the agenda, to educate themselves about what was coming up, and they asked their council member to remove that for further explanation. So that has worked. It's worked.
And that mechanism is already there if the citizens take advantage of it.
And they have 4 days. Now, if a resident called me about a consent agenda item, I would assume, first of all, I would do the best I could to explain it as I see it. But I would assume that there might be other citizens with a similar issue, a similar question. So I would ask that the staff essentially do a department report on that issue. Make sure we understand, and the citizenry understands exactly what we're voting.
And please understand me. I'm not suggesting that we've got a broken process or anything, or a broken system with the way we're doing things now. I see, and this is just me, and I may be wrong. I see difficulty down the road trying to manage under the system where citizens are asked to speak on any item they want to on the issue. That's me, and that's my opinion, and it may not turn out to be anything, but I do see some issues there, and I think that there's this notion of we can't evolve into a government that every decision we make is, we've got that we get citizen comment on by necessity. I mean, certainly we want it when it's necessary.
I don't want anybody to say they wanted to tell me something that I didn't hear.
Right, I agree with that. I mean, yeah, right.
And that's their last, standing right there is their last chance. And I want them to do it before I vote, rather than after I vote.
It may just be a matter of rearranging the agenda, tweaking it a little bit so that it does satisfy that situation. That citizens need. Because I've got an issue on the consent agenda coming up, but I'd like to explain why.
See, what I like about the simplicity of what we proposed and voted on tonight is it accomplishes every objective that I've heard anyone ask us to consider. It is not a process that will ever have to be undone. If it doesn't work, it'll be because the citizens do not want to make it work, and we just quit offering that opportunity. Then maybe we set up a committee and go through this process of coming back and saying this is the changes we're going to make to our agenda here. But right now, I think I'm answering one specific contention that I heard expressed by people who really didn't have a dog in the referendum fight.
Right, and I'm not, like I said, it's not about whether I'm in favor of that or not. I'd like to see it more thoughtful, I guess.
The more we go through a process, all I'm saying is why don't we just continue this and sit there
That's fine.
and we can always undo it at any time.
Right.
You do have the motion.
I do have a motion, yeah. So it either needs to have a second or die. To have a second or die.
I don't hear a second. But thank you, Mr. Lail. We appreciate your comments, just like we do any citizen's comments.
Thank you.
We have a closed session. Oh, I would like to mention one more thing. Our library, they have the nicest little coffee shop. As you go in there, you can get a cup of coffee. You can take it up into the library. That's the only time you're allowed to take beverages into the library, is if you buy them on the spot. Don't take your Slurpees with you. It ain't going to fly. But it is so nice. You walk in, the fragrance is there. The furniture, got the Hickory sculpted furniture by Kimmerman Manufacturing, and it just looks fantastic. And I was so proud to be able to participate in the ribbon cutting and have some of that first breakfast. That's where I get most of my food these days. What are we going to do after the
Did you cover recognition of first request in the meeting?
Oh, are there any people who would like to be heard?
Yep. Anybody else want to speak?